5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to the GHT Overland podcast.
Today is a very special day.
Is it my birthday?
No, that's in January. It's next month.
Ooh, we've reached 50.
50. That is amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're a first-time listener and you've landed on this podcast, it's awesome. If you love overlanding, adventure travel, any kind of travel with wheels, off-road, seeing amazing places, learning the most amazing things ever, this is episode 50.
It's gone by so fast.
It's gone by amazingly fast. Did you ever think we'd get here?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like in the summer we were 21.
Exactly.
Now we're 50.
So,
and we're actually happy about it.
Yeah.
So, if you're a first-time listener, thank you. If you've come back again,
Thank you.
thank you. So, Lisa, do you remember what we forgot on the first episode or what we talked about?
When we reached 21, we needed to toast. That was an accomplishment.
Based on my recollection, and we can go back and listen, but you got 50% of that right. So we were celebrating our first episode, and we had said we should have brought glasses so that we could clink, like cheer
Cheer.
to the first episode. So at number 50, we remembered our glasses. So cheers to you. Thank you. We appreciate you listening. And thank you for joining the GHT Overland podcast. Our goal is to bring you the greatest interviews from experienced overlanders around the globe, providing you, our listener, quality insights and knowledge that hopefully bring a laugh or two as we learn from the stories and experiences. So, as we pass on the stories and knowledge of overlanders from places like Australia, Africa, the Americas, Portugal, and beyond, you will learn the basics to the advanced in overlanding. So buckle up and get ready for a new adventure. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lisa. Today's guest, yet another great overlander, as we caught up with them in the back of their troopy on a Wi-Fi signal in all places, Kathmandu.
That just seems crazy to me.
It is.
Like 12 plus hours away, and they sounded like they were in the same room.
Yeah, it was
It's
great.
just wild. And they had to be on Wi-Fi because if they were on a cell signal, I guess the government not really listens, but monitor. And so that would have made the signal even worse, which is really weird because that's something obviously that we're totally not used to.
Yeah.
So we greatly appreciate all the extra efforts that they went through to make that interview happen. It was a ton of fun. You know, it's becoming very clear the knowledge base in the community of overlanders, I think, is endless. This week's guest absolutely brings it, from why they chose a pop-up roof conversion over a rooftop tent, to tips on preparing your vehicle for transport. This is a good one. I say we move on and we get into the introduction of this week's guest. What do you say, Lisa?
Let's do it.
All right. Again, thank you for listening and supporting the show. We are delighted to be at show number 50.
Woohoo!
Yeah!
Today's featured guests are Mark and Jolie with the Way Overland. Mark and Jolie are on a 3-year overlanding trip from Australia to London. They packed up their Troopcarrier after a 12-month build-out in July of 2017, documenting their trip with a vlog on YouTube after receiving an email from a listener about these two Overlanders, we knew this would be an episode everyone would enjoy. So thank you, Chris Tiedemann.
Yeah, and without further ado, welcome to the podcast, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hello.
So why don't you go ahead and fill us in on any gaps in that intro and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Sure. Well, I'm 32 and Jolie's 26. We're both, prior to leaving, we're both in the construction industry in Australia. I'm a builder and
I'm a building designer.
Jolie's a building designer. We originally are from the east coast of Australia, but we were living in Perth for 3 years prior to leaving, just for work reasons. I grew up on a farm in a small town on the east coast.
And I'm from Newcastle, which is a couple of hours north of Sydney. Nice town on the beach.
And that's where we met.
That sounds really nice. So tell us, where are we reaching you today?
We're currently in Kathmandu in Nepal.
And what's the weather like today?
Beautiful blue skies. It's a bit brisk this morning, which is a very refreshing change from the previous temperatures we've been driving through over the last few months. It's nice to be able to wear some more comfortable clothes and pull the blankets out at night time.
Very good. And I know we've got quite a bit of a time difference. What time and day is it for you?
It's a Monday morning and it's 10 to 7. But as when you're overlanding, we usually wake up when the sun comes up, so it's not entirely early for us, so that's fine.
Very good. And it's about 6 o'clock in the evening on Sunday for us.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what inspired Overland Adventure for you guys?
Well, I was actually quite fortunate from a rather young age. My family, I was fortunate enough to have parents who were into traveling and traveling by vehicle, and we traveled a lot when I was younger, and that also included a 12-month journey around Australia. So from a young age, I was aware that overlanding was possible, and then I also traveled abroad quite significantly, and also drove from New York to Panama with 6 of my friends. We just bought cars there and completed that journey. So when I last came back from living abroad, I was kind of looking for the next kind of trip to do. So there was this route or the Africa leg, and seeing that we both hadn't spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and due to the diversity of cultures we would potentially reach on this trip, this one kind of took preference over the African one, which not to say that won't happen at a later date, but that was kind of the driving force behind completing this one. When Jolie and I got together, we kind of bonded over mutual mindsets, and I could probably comfortably say this probably isn't something she would have ever thought of doing prior to us meeting, but fortunately, when I first mentioned this as something I wanted to do, she was completely on board. So, it's
been a bit of a learning curve for me, as it's just completely different from anything I've ever done before. But yeah, I love it. It's a fantastic way to travel.
And Jolie, did you do any traveling prior to meeting?
Yeah, I had done some traveling, but it wasn't necessarily overland. It was more just backpacking or having a girls' holiday away sort of thing. It's been great opening my eyes to traveling this way, because you definitely see so much more of the world and get to experience the culture a lot more.
So tell us more about your current vehicle.
Yep. So we've gone with the last model of the Troopcarrier. So it's the 2006 Toyota Troopcarrier, which is the last of the straight 6 turbo models. Quite hard to find for a reasonable price with low kilometres in Australia. So we searched for months to try and find this one. Unfortunately, one came up very close to our home, which we were quite happy about, and it was quite serendipitous. But after we bought it, we then spent a long time doing the design for the fit out, and we had the roof cut off and the roof conversion put on. Again, fortunately, the Alu-Cab Australian head office was in Perth, so we were able to get that done also in the same town. And
Well, that worked out pretty good.
yeah, it was very good. There is another company in Australia that do them, but they are on the East Coast, so it was going to be complicated to if we're going to go with that option. So thankfully, everyone was in the same town, and then we also spent a couple of months completely stripping down the car and rebuilding it back up to the requirements that we wanted. So we built all the back fit out ourselves in our small studio apartment in Perth. And I think it's good having building the fit out ourselves and understanding how everything goes together. Being a builder, the actual carpentry work wasn't difficult for me, but say 12-volt electrics seemed like voodoo. So it was good learning and doing all the cabling myself, because now I know that comfortably that if anything happened, I can confidently fix it, which obviously in some countries, and it has happened so far, that if there's a problem or I want to put something else on, I have the tools and the capabilities to do that. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, and you know where everything is located because you put it in yourself.
That's correct.
Anything mechanically that you rebuilt on the vehicle to make sure that it was in good condition for your trip?
We didn't rebuild anything as such. Before leaving Perth, there's a company in Perth which is a Land Cruiser specialist, and we took it there and just had a major service done on it. And so it just gave me the confidence that we're kind of starting fresh before we left. And this model Land Cruiser has the stronger engine, gearbox and driveline, so we're confident that fingers crossed that we wouldn't have any problems after that. And so far it's been good. We haven't had any major mechanical problems, just minor problems with the car, but nothing significant, which, considering where we've taken the car, it's probably understandable that something may go wrong so far.
Yeah, sure. Now, you guys started off in Australia. Where did you ship your vehicle when you packed it up and left Australia?
So we drove the car from Perth to Darwin via Uluru in the centre. And then we shipped a car from Darwin to Dili in Timor-Leste, which it's a very short distance. So it's only 2 days at sea. So really close, but in comparison for price-wise for shipping, it's almost as expensive as shipping it back from the UK to Australia.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, there's
a monopoly.
There's only one or two companies, I think, that do that leg as opposed to the more international routes. So, they definitely have a monopoly on it, and unfortunately, and if that's the route you want to go, you don't really have much option.
And that's the price you're going to pay. Any recommendations that you've got in packing up a vehicle in a shipping container and shipping it off to another country?
It's out. It's out. That leg that we did was very short. You can almost throw a stone from Darwin to Timor. And it's not very rough. I imagine for us shipping it didn't require a great amount of planning. We had to strip everything off the roof to fit it in the container, which is not something that we wanted to do because the roof rack on our roof is very difficult to get off. So fortunately, we were able to pack everything off the roof, bar the roof rack, into the car, and we deflated the tyres to just the back ones to around between 5 and 10 psi. And that managed to get into the container with about 10 mil to spare.
Squeezed in there.
Yeah, very close. But thankfully, once you get in, you can inflate the tyres a bit more. But yeah, look, we haven't shipped on a major international route which goes over bad seas, but I can't imagine it would be very different to what we did, which is, constant making sure that the car's in the container strapped down well, and your belongings are secure inside. just on the shipping though, we also shipped from Borneo to mainland Malaysia. That wasn't in a container, that was on a Roro and a roll-on roller ferry, and that was a different experience and completely contrasting to our Darwin to Dili one, whereas that we drop off at the port and they drive it onto the boat, and which obviously has some inherent risk with theft, and it is renowned for people stealing, the people at the port stealing from your car. So we had to build petitions inside of the car to stop people being able to get into the back of the car, which is not something you want to have to think about. You honestly, you're leaving your whole house with these people and you expect them to have some respect. But even the shipping agent said, don't leave anything in your car, even to the extent of like anything in the front, including floor mats, your dash mats, your radios, or anything. So it's a known problem, and I would definitely recommend anybody looking to do that sort of Roro journey in the future to go to that extent of securing your belongings.
So all of those pieces that you had to collect, where did you put them?
The petitioning or
all the things that you had to remove from the vehicle, do you have to like pack that up in a bag and then take it with you to meet up with the vehicle?
We had the Tetris theme song playing and managed to squeeze everything into the back of the car. You could not move in here.
No, even to the extent where some of them were, like my long surfboard was protruding into the front, so Jolie couldn't really sit in the front of the car properly. But yeah, we managed to squeeze everything from the outside into the back of the car. Thankfully, there's a lot of space in these cars. And then we just took belongings with us that were really important, like our computers, cameras, and hard drives and the like.
Okay.
So your troop carrier becomes a third party in your group here. Have you given it a name?
Yeah, it's a bit of a silly name. It's kind of like Snoop Dogg, but Troop Dog.
That's awesome. That's great.
Embarrassing.
Everybody has a name for I'd say, well, probably 90% of people have got a name for their vehicle.
Yeah.
And they're always really fun to learn what those are.
Yeah.
Any specific recovery gear that you've got on the vehicle that you would recommend that our listeners should either have with them or definitely consider having with them?
We've got 3 items which we have used, and I would probably recommend the places that we go, these would be a minimum requirement, and that's the winch, or some form of winch. We have a mounted winch, and the Maxtrax or something similar, and a shovel. They're quite simple, but we have used those. We've used the Maxtrax and the shovel a lot just to get us out, and we've used the winch only to get other people out. But it's just peace of mind. On all my 4-wheel drives, I've always had winches, and it's good to know if you're traveling solo that you've got a means to potentially get you out. The Maxtrax have been super handy, just getting us out of sand bogs, and the shovel as well. So as a minimum requirement, I'd say at least those ones. So you could also go down the path of making sure you get your snatch straps and your high lift jacks and the like. But as a minimum, those 3, I'd say.
Okay, and on the Maxtrax, do you have 1 set or 2 sets?
We've only got 2, and we had considered getting 4 prior to leaving, but so far the 2 has been sufficient to get us out of anything that we've been stuck in. 4 would have potentially made those situations a little bit easier, but the two's sufficed for now.
What is the one thing you value the most, either on or in your vehicle?
I think one of the main things is the fact that we had the roof conversion done. So when we want to, we have a living space inside, and we're able to stand up comfortably. So if it's really bad weather outside, like when we're in Indonesia for their monsoon season and it's just torrential rain, we could escape it comfortably and the cabin fever wasn't as bad as what it would have been if we hadn't have had it done. So yeah, it's
So only a little bit of cabin fever?
just a little bit.
Yeah, sitting inside for 5 days obviously takes its toll.
Yeah, I bet it does. I've always wondered about that and doing just a rooftop temp kind of setup.
Yeah.
And if it's really cold and yucky like it usually is in the Pacific Northwest where we are,
yeah,
I'm not sure that I could handle a week or two straight.
Yeah. That was the driving kind of motivation behind going to that extra extent and having the roost conversion done. It's obviously not a necessity for doing these long distance trips. I know a lot of people travel with just rooftop tents, but we had the opportunity to do it, and we obviously just wanted to be comfortable. So we're prepared to make that additional financial input it and build it so we had that space to escape to. And yeah, it's definitely something we really
very happy with it.
Yeah, it's one of the better parts of the build easily.
Do you feel that gives you a lot more, I want to say square footage, but just space? And if you need to get something, you don't have to get out of the tent and then go down to the vehicle. Everything is just right there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And even because if we need some space, one of us can go up into the bed and the other one can hang out downstairs, down the bottom. It's such a good living space with such a small space.
Yeah, that's right. We've also got, like, where we are sitting at the moment is in the bottom of the car, and this is the lounge area, which also turns into another bed. So there is essentially two beds which can be occupied at once. It is quite cozy in the bottom bed. We only use this under, let's say, extreme circumstances. Say if the wind is very strong, and I think we've only done that twice. Due to wind, we will have to pull the roof down and sleep in this area. And it's just, we have flexibility. And I imagine in a rooftop tent in those same situations, it would be quite difficult to sleep as well. So yeah, we've got another option, which is good.
Anything you originally packed that you never used or removed from your overall setup?
There was a couple of things. We had a camp table. Well, we still have it. And I think we've maybe used it 3 times. So we're contemplating actually getting rid of it. And in Australia, we also had a camp oven. And we used that a couple of times, though they're not as practical when we're overseas because, like, in Asia, like, trying to source the timber to have a fire, and then it creates lots of smoke, and
it draws a lot of attention. Yeah. So with the table, we have a rear table mounted on our rear door, and we also have the table inside and the areas to cook, multiple areas to cook. So we haven't really had a need to set an additional table up outside. We usually prepare the food and then sit down and just hold it and eat it. So it's a bit of a funny one. Our chairs that we have too are quite low, so the table that we have is a little bit higher. So obviously I've always carried tables previously to this trip, but it's just something we haven't really used.
Yeah.
The camp oven we use in Australia, as Jolie mentioned, but it's setting a fire up and cooking on the fire. It's something we did in Australia, but not so much in Asia. So we did get rid of the camp oven just to save space, really.
Did you end up using that table a lot more when you started, and then you just kind of got used to not having all that extra table space, or have you just really not used it much since you guys left?
Well, when we left, it was actually, we left in winter, so we were predominantly kind of sitting inside to start off with.
Okay.
So we weren't using it. We did start using it once it warmed up, and we were sitting outside more and around Central Australia and to the north. But we kind of realised that it's actually in our rear bag on our rear wheels, and getting it out and setting it up it's not a labour-intensive project, but it does take time, and we don't really need it, so we don't do it. So we've just stopped using it, really. But
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. So what are your current top 2 or 3 destinations, along with a little detail on what made them so special for you?
I think for me, and I think also Mark, the number one is probably the Australian Outback. I hadn't spent any time there before, but Mark had when he was younger, when he went around Australia. Just the remoteness and how clean everything is. It was just amazing. And the landscapes are just so diverse as well. And I suppose I didn't really truly appreciate it until we left Australia and we're in Asia, where although it's still very beautiful, it's extremely busy. So I had this great appreciation for the Australian Outback and how pure it is. And then the second, which was, I think maybe just after we left Australia, while we were waiting for the car to arrive in Timor, we went out to an island just north of the city called Atauro Island. And you have to get a $4 ferry out there and then hike about 5 hours to this little hut on the beach where there's no phone signal, no electricity, and there was amazing diving just 70 meters off the beach. So we sort of just...
It was a good place to wait for the car.
Yeah, it was just beautiful.
It sounds like it. What was the name of the island again?
It's Atauro. It's Atauro.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like a good place to wait for a car.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And any other destinations that stand out to you, Mark?
We've just recently passed through northeast India, and potentially a bit naive of myself of what to expect from India. I usually associated India with the kind of scenes you see from Varanasi with the Ganges and the truckloads of people and quite busy. And what we've experienced so far from once we've crossed through Myanmar into Thailand is the complete contrast. Amazing landscapes and topography, deep valleys, huge mountain ranges, blue rivers. And it's just been mind-blowing, some of the scenery in northeast India. People are really friendly.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's been a great start to India. I think that potentially might change a little bit as we go further west, but yeah, I was just not expecting it at all. So that's definitely up on the list of the top places so far.
Okay, very good.
Tell us about your kitchen setup and anything you would change about it.
So the current kitchen setup is inside the car, but we have 2 petrol cookers. So there's a double one and then also a single one, which is really handy just for like if you just want to boil some water or something because it's so compact. So we take them outside to cook. And yeah, I don't think there's really much that we change. Maybe the cooker would be more easily accessible from the back, but yeah, I don't think we'd really change anything. We have quite a big fridge as well, which we haven't really utilised as much since we left Australia, which we had just completely full the whole time when we were there.
Yeah, the food in Australia is, in comparison to Asia, is obviously quite expensive. So, and traveling in the Outback too, you need to take food to last you a longer period of time because you're away from civilization. So we have an 80-litre Engel, a 40-litre fridge, 40-litre freezer, which when in Australia, that was full, completely full the whole time, the fridge and the freezer. Since leaving Australia, due to the proximity to people continually and the availability of food, we're only running the 40-litre fridge at the moment. We use the other side as a kind of a cold store, which is good because it gives us that extra space. But if we weren't doing the Australian leg of it, we could probably get away with a smaller fridge. But having that there is obviously good for us. But apart from that, there's nothing really I think we'd change. We've kind of got everything. As Jolie mentioned, having the availability to access the cookers from the back may be something we could look at, but what we've got now definitely works for us.
And what was the name of the cooker?
They're Coleman Dual Fuel cookers.
Yeah. So we've got the bigger one, which is the green. It's probably about 1.5 feet by a foot, say. That has the dual burners in it. And then we've got a single one, which is, it's quite small, a single burner. And that we bought that, as Jolly mentioned, just to boil water. So we didn't have to get the big one out. And it's really handy.
How often do you use that dual burner opposed to the single?
It's more for just if we're cooking dinner. So just if, I've got a pot of rice going and I'm cooking a stir fry or something, it's more just a dinner time
so
option.
We like to eat the local cuisine because obviously that's part of the traveling here. So we will cook when we're either away from a town, and so that may be two nights a week, perhaps 2 or 3 nights a week. And we'll get the big cooker out usually only for those ones. We cook breakfast nearly every day, or eat breakfast every day. So or just boil the kettle. So the little one's out frequently during the days, nearly every day. But the big one, maybe only 2 to 3 times a week.
And what's a favorite recipe?
I think my go-to recipe is probably doing a curry. They're definitely not anything compared to actual Indian curries, but they're just so easy to put together, and I can usually make a fair bit of it so that we can have some for lunch the next day. Yeah. And Mark seems to like them, so...
That's good. Have you picked up any new recipes or ways of doing curry as you're in India?
Not yet. We've only briefly been in India before we came to Nepal, but I'm definitely looking to do a bit of a cooking class while we're here. Take home some knowledge. Yeah.
And how do you plan out your minimal food supplies for this trip, for those longer stretches between cities?
It was definitely a bit of trial and error to begin with, though we were eating a lot more meat as well in Australia because we had the freezer, and actually one thing that for places like Australia where you're going to really remote places, having the option to have a freezer and in addition to a fridge was really important because I could keep fish or meat for a longer period of time without having to go into a town or go to having canned meats, which I had to do at one point, and have tuna because that was never in my diet before. So just, I think having the freezer was great, but just writing down the days and then sort of working out your meals and then going from there. But trial and error was how I figured it out
to begin with. And then, so before going on a longer trips through a section of the Outback, we'd plan how many days we'd be there, how many meals, and just write essentially a meal plan for that period, and then go by accordingly. So we'd have the meats, and then we also carry a full store of non-perishables as a backup. So say worst case scenario, the fridge failed, we would then have food to last us for several days, which we still carry now. But it's about a meal plan. There's duration and making sure you're buying foods which is not taking up excessive space.
We found that making wraps were a great way because it wasn't just something that you'd cook once and then all that food would be gone. It was something that would last, 3 or 4 days out of just a couple of things.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now, what do you use for the food that's non-perishable? Like in the U.S., we've got Mountain House, which is a freeze-dried food. What is it that you guys use?
Things more just bolognese sauce, and chickpeas or tuna, rice, stuff like that.
Yes, okay. And then we have the canned food as well. So the canned tunas, which Jolly's not very fond of. But basic canned food, which we've kind of chosen food based on its nutritional value. So obviously the tuna's giving us the protein, and other foods like that where we're still getting nutritional value from them, but they're not consuming a lot of space in the car, so we can store them without worrying for longer periods.
Okay. And any tips that you've got for purchasing fresh meats and vegetables from small towns and villages outside your home country of Australia?
Go to the markets, not the supermarkets, because there's so much fresh fruit there, and they have so many different varieties which they just don't have at home as well. So it's really interesting seeing all the different fruits and veg when they're raw. Like, you're not just going to a restaurant and getting something new in your curry or whatever. So I think go to the markets, and it's so cheap, and you can sort of bargain with them a bit if you want as well. And yeah, and it's a good way to meet the locals too.
And how do you do your laundry tasks on the road?
So since we left Australia, there's local laundries that you can go to, and they charge you about $1 per kilo, and they'll wash and dry it for you over about a 24-hour period. Or there's laundromats, which is even cheaper again, or we'll also wash just our everyday stuff by hand.
Yeah, that's usually our first option, is to just the clothes we wear during the days, during the week, just our go-to clothes, we usually wash ourselves. But if we're doing a larger wash, say if we haven't had the opportunity to do that, or we need to do bed sheets, for example, we'll and we've got, like, say, several weeks of clothes to wash, we'll take it to a local lady to do the washing, and it usually costs us between $5 and $10 to do a significant quantity of washing. And they fold them and usually iron them for you as well. So
nice.
It's not all bad.
And the hygiene end, do you have a shower and toilet set up, or what's your preferred method of bathing?
We don't really have either of those. we have a solar shower, which has worked fine for now. And we're always around the ocean or local streams, so we do have that ability to wash, and we're essentially camping. So if it's not around a town or a village to use their facilities, we're usually somewhere in the Outback where we use those facilities.
And anything you'd change about your current setup?
Would you change anything?
Potentially, what we realised, it's not a necessity, but we would probably look at putting a bigger water tank in. We currently carry about 65 litres, I'd say, which works. We usually get about 7 days out of that, but it would be a luxury to have more. I'd say, like, maybe the 100 to 150 litres would be great. It just it gives us a longer period, really. Especially in the hotter climates where we're drinking a lot more water, it just leaves us with a bigger reserve. Thankfully, in Asia, though, there isn't really a tap water as such to drink, or a public water, and the ones that are, you don't want to drink those either. So they're getting, I think 4 gallons. They have these big jugs you can get that the locals use, and they cost maybe $1, $1 for 4 gallons. So actually getting water to fill our tank is not difficult. But yeah, so just having that extra capacity on the car to carry more water in places like Australia would be great. But apart from that, I don't think there's anything else really.
Yeah.
And where do you keep that water? Do you have a tank underneath the Troopcarrier, or is it separate containers on the outside?
We've got a tank mounted under the rear of the car, which we were very, very lucky to find. When we were building the car, the tank was one option which we'd spoken to multiple fabricators about getting one made up. And if you've ever got a tank made up before, you'll know that they're quite expensive. And just before we were about to pull the trigger and get someone to build one came up on a website similar to Craigslist in Australia, and it was about $80, I think. Yeah. From another Troopcarrier, and it was perfect, stainless steel. So yeah, that's mounted at the rear, and we've been very happy with that.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of things came together for you quite well when you were doing your build out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's great. So what's been your number one biggest challenge you've had to overcome on the road?
Yeah, thankfully we haven't encountered any problems with border crossings or shipping or just general running of the car to date, which has been great. I'd probably say, and we probably both agree with this, that something we've had to, let's say, adjust to or a challenge is living in a 2 meter by 3 meter box and not being more than a meter apart from each other 24/7.
Yeah.
Prior to leaving, I was actually working away. So for 3 out of 4 weeks, I would be away. So we went from that to being in each other's space 24/7. So there was an adjustment period which required that to happen. But in the scheme of things, that's been our biggest challenge, let's say. So it's not all bad.
So what tips would the both of you have for our listeners as they go on a journey? And everybody's going to go through that same thing, right? Because nobody's used to just living in a vehicle with each other. Any tips you would have for our listeners in making that adjustment?
I think just making sure that you have your own interests and you make the time to spend that time with yourself. It's just giving each other that time out so that you don't end up killing each other.
Yeah, it's been like having your own interests and spending time outdoors, like by yourself, and doing things just for yourself, by yourself. I think that's really important. Spending time apart, essentially. It's just because you're traveling in a car together doesn't mean you need to be together 24/7.
Okay, that's great.
Jolie, do you send Mark upstairs sometimes?
Downstairs is the doghouse.
Or downstairs.
He goes to the lower apartment.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Loved it. What a great couple from Australia. They've got a great YouTube channel. So if you didn't pick that up, be sure and check out their YouTube channel, The Way Overland. And on their logo, you're going to see TWO. So there's a lot of really new things that we learned from Jolie and Mark.
Well,
from Kathmandu. Well, from Australia, but
right.
They were in Kathmandu. That's just crazy to me.
So when they shipped the vehicle, so they had to build a partition. So there was no enticing of grab and go, because they had to take everything off their vehicle and stuff it inside so anything wouldn't get stolen.
Yeah, so it was completely different. When they shipped in a shipping container, they didn't have to do that. The one you're talking about is when they shipped without the shipping container, and the guys that worked on the ship actually drove their vehicle onto the ship. And so they had to build a partition so that the only place these guys could get to was the driver's seat, so that they couldn't quickly grab something and steal it, because as Mark had said, it was a known issue. Right. So super interesting, some really great tips. There's a lot of really good information covered in this one. Little tips, little tricks from a couple that's out doing it, that's got the experience.
Well, and traveling together so closely 7 days a week, so I took away from that you must have either an upstairs or downstairs. So if you're in the doghouse, you got to move.
Yeah, or just either already being comfortable traveling together in a vehicle in a very close space.
Yeah.
And or making sure that you're mentally aware of that and you've got a plan. And I think both Mark and Jolie pointed out some really good ideas to have some interest of your own, to be able to go do things on your own.
Yeah, to get a break.
Yep. Super important.
I wouldn't drive you crazy at all. It would be the other way around.
True.
So, Troop Dogg.
Oh, Troop Dogg. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I love that name. That was really good. All right, cool. Wrapping up 50.
I know.
Next week it's 51.
It's exciting.
You're getting old quick.
No, this has nothing to do with age.
It's a lot of fun.
Our interview with The Way Overland is our longer format interview so we split these into 2 episodes for your downloading pleasure.
Yep, and in next week's episode, we talk about border crossings, navigation, communication, and lots of other fun stuff with Mark and Jolie from the Way Overland.
It's a good idea to visit the show notes page on our website at ghteoverland.com/podcasts. Select the Way Overland episode. All the details and helpful links are already there for you.
And remember, you can send any questions, suggestions, and feedback, much like Chris did, so that we got the Way Overland on the podcast at ghteoverlandpodcast@gmail.com. You should also feel free to slide into the DMs on social. So mainly, I think Instagram is probably going to work the best, but Facebook as well. If you want to just send us a direct message, that works out well as well.
We truly would love to hear from you.
Yep. So send us an email, send us a direct message. Either way is good with us. All right, Lisa, what else are we supposed to cover? Oh, so be sure and share the episode. Please, please, please. So share it with your friends. They'll dig it, and you'll be famous because you shared it. So that'd be cool. And be sure and leave a review, especially over on the old iTunes. That would mean the world to us. It'd be great if we could get some more reviews, ratings, and all that fun stuff, spreading great messages and fun stories from people like Jolie and Mark. So thank you, and we will see you next Thursday for part 2 on the GHT Overland podcast.